Here is Bernie Sanders. And again, we spoke to Matt Duss about this earlier. These three resolutions will not pass, but it at least begins a journey in which hopefully we will see more Democrats, and then who knows what. I mean, Donald Trump is going to do what Donald Trump wants to do in terms of Gaza at this point. But at the very least, it's important to get a sense of, like, who's on what side. This vote, I don't think it's taken place yet. But here is Bernie Sanders at a press conference yesterday saying the U.S. cannot keep supplying weapons to a country that is in violation of U.S. law.
The United States government is currently in violation of the law, and every member of the U.S. Senate who believes in the rule of law should vote for these resolutions. The Foreign Assistance Act and the Arms Export Control Act are very clear. The United States cannot provide weaponry to countries that violate internationally recognized human rights or block U.S. humanitarian aid. According to the United Nations, much of the international community and every humanitarian organization on the ground in Gaza, Israel is clearly in violation of these laws. Under these circumstances, it is illegal for the U.S. government to provide them with more offensive weaponry. Joint resolutions of disapproval are Congress's tool to enforce those laws. The United States government
and here is Peter Welch, the other Vermont senator, weighing in on this, supporting these resolutions.
What has happened is over 100,000 children and innocent bystanders have been severely injured, including amputation. And what's unfolding before our very eyes right now is mass starvation and the spread of disease. Is the United States in its foreign policy, with that commitment we've had to Israel, forced to be blind to the suffering before our very eyes, particularly when it's our munitions that are being used? Should we be blind to the suffering of those Palestinian women and children when top military officials in Israel themselves have said that there's no further military purpose for continued bombing and military activity in Gaza? Our view is no, that the humanitarian considerations are important. It's consistent with the Leahy Law, and we should enforce it.
There it is. The vote takes place today, I think, later today. Again, this comes on a day where the U.S. government vetoed a unconditional ceasefire at the UN Security Council, and 14 members voted for it. U.S. was the only veto, or I should say only no vote, and they, of course, in the Security Council have a veto. Bernie Sanders is introducing some resolutions today. We'll talk about that in a moment in terms of cutting weapons transfers to Israel. But there's a real quality out of the Biden administration that they are, this feels sort of like, and both with Ukraine and this, and with Ukraine, I can understand it on some level. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I can understand on both levels, but there's a real quality of like hopping in the getaway car and just like, I don't know, unloading all of, I don't know what the metaphor is, but there seems to be like a fervor to this that is like as if, Joe Biden is sitting in there going like, I'm going to remake the Middle East, even if I only have like 6 weeks to do it at this point.
No, I think that's right. And let's take these two things separately. First, on Israel, I think a lot of people, in my view, wrongly, kind of overstated the extent to which Biden's policy on Gaza was driven politically. It was just this idea that if I pressure Israel, or if I'm not seen as supporting Israel fulsomely enough. The Democrats will take political damage. But I think what we see now, and I've always thought that was a bit wrong, I think clearly now, even after the election is over, this would be a moment to really impose costs, to put pressure on Israel. And these resolutions from Senator Sanders are a perfect way to do it. It's a way for the Biden administration to say, listen, this is coming from Congress, Netanyahu, you need to take some steps and take this ceasefire deal that you've been blocking for the past months. But we see it's not about that. It's about Joe Biden's deep-seated, unshakable ideological belief that the U.S. should just unconditionally support Israel in whatever it's doing, no matter how grotesque, no matter how violent and destructive. Now,
I mean, is this just about protecting Israel, or is it also a more comprehensive, like, is there an end game here? I mean, does Biden have an end game in mind outside of, well, you tell me. I mean, I can't, because I can project into like what Donald Trump's end game is to the extent that he has one. It's from Miriam Adelson, and honestly, we're going to annex the West Bank, and U.S. is going to sign off on it. There's going to be settlements in Gaza, and there's a hope that the Palestinian people essentially, become analogous to our indigenous people in this country, and just sort of like lose their ability to inhibit our growth, et cetera, et cetera. Is that what Biden's is, or is it also include some notion of like isolating Iran? Like, what's the end game here?
Yeah, I mean, first on Trump, I honestly don't think Trump cares that much. He just knows that Miriam Adelson gives him a lot of money and that right-wing Christian evangelicals vote for him. And these are things both of those groups want. So he's just going to hand this over to whomever, David Friedman or Jared Kushner, and let them handle it. Now, with Biden, as I said, it is just deeply ideological. But I do think, I'm not sure how much Biden himself, but clearly people around him like Brett McGurk, I think Jake Sullivan, Amos Hochstein, some of his closest advisors on this, seem to have this idea that, okay, well, Israel is deciding to continue to hit Hamas. They're hitting Hezbollah. They've hit Iran. And we're just going to kind of let them reshuffle the regional security deck in a way that's advantageous to them and potentially to us. And I think, the next time this kind of plan works will be the first. I mean, we have seen multiple efforts of precisely this kind. The Iraq War was an effort of this kind. Now, obviously, we had troops in the region, we invaded ourselves. It was different to that extent. But the basic logic, which is that, okay, we're just going to hit all of these groups. We're going to show strength. And then some things will happen and the situation will be more stable and more advantageous. But the long-term costs of this, I think, are going to be enormous. We're going to be dealing with this, the fallout from all of this for a generation.
Do you think they have some like scheme in their head? I mean, because it feels like Saudi Arabia is already starting to shift their perspective on Iran. But do you think they have some type of like a perspective of, we just need some type of soft hegemony in that region, which will so that China does not have access to this oil, and we can basically, regardless of what price is associated with it or whatnot, obviously within reason, but basically we cordon this off. And this is, as we start to, enter into a new sort of potential Cold War, we need to have this area essentially.
Yeah, I think you just said the magic word here, which is China. China quickly has become the kind of focusing, like the lens through which all of U.S. foreign policy is now seen, strategic competition with China. This shift went started really under Trump, but the Biden administration really picked it up. And I think this is kind of the logic behind, the efforts to kind of have this tripartite U.S., Saudi, Israel deal that the Biden administration wasted, in my view, an enormous amount of time, energy, and resources trying to bring off. And the real focus of that, the real goal was to box China out of the Middle East and to maintain the United States as the kind of regional security guarantor. And I think Saudi Arabia under Mohammed bin Salman has actually been very effective at sort of bidding the United States up. you go back a couple of years and you saw this Iran-Saudi détente that was, quote unquote, brokered by China, when in fact this had already essentially been negotiated, and they brought China in to take a few photos there at the end. Why? Who was the audience for that? It was Joe Biden. It was the United States, as if to say, listen, we can do stuff with China unless you're going to give us a better deal. Now, the real kind of what makes this so absurd is China actually has no real interest in supplanting the United States as the regional hegemon. Why in the world would they want that? They've watched the United States hemorrhaging resources and attention and capital and credibility over the past 3 decades plus. Why would they want a piece of that action? But basically, this is an effort a very successful effort by some of our client states and partner states to keep the United States engaged in the region in a way that benefits them.
But, my understanding is like this has been the agenda of neocons since the 1993, 92 Project for a New American Century document. I remember talking, I think I probably brought this up with you, with Gary Hart in 2004. Yeah. And him retelling, he was chairman with, I think it was Rudman, I can't remember who, a 21st century threats committee. And they went around it, and everybody was saying non-state actor, terrorist. One person said China. People all sort of laughed at that person. They came back 4 months ago. 4 months later, same thing. They went across non-state actors, China. They sort of laughed at that person. That person never came back to that. And it was, I think it was Lynn Cheney or Liz Cheney, who was sitting on that committee at the beginning. And then I also remember being stuck in Long Beach, California, going on they have like a aircraft carrier museum there or something. I can't remember. And the guy doing the tour was talking about the Asian pivot. So we were already moving and this must have been 2010 maybe or so. I mean, so this has been like simmering under the surface, but this was the McGurk's opportunity and others to really sort of go whole hog, wasn't it? Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.